Well, the European Union is readying consensus on a law that will force big tech to monitor their platforms more carefully for illegal content. The Digital Services Act will, for the first time, spell out how big tech should keep users safe. Now, governments will now have more power to force companies to take down content deemed unsafe for minors. This also includes hate speech and terrorist propaganda. Failure to comply could see the platforms slapped with fines that are up to 6% of their annual revenue. Governments can also trigger additional powers to combat disinformation during a crisis, such as a war or a pandemic. Rosie Birch joins us now from Brussels. Rosie, we're still waiting on a decision by the EU on that Services Act. But what is the sentiment there? Do you think this deal will clear?
This deal will clear. It's just a matter of when. And that's really down to those co-legislators within the European Union, so the European Parliament and the European Council, which represents member states and overseen by the European Commission. That's the bloc's executive right behind me, deciding and hashing out the final details of this law. But we do expect an agreement today. If not today, then in the coming days or weeks. They are taking part right now in what's called a trilogue. So that's when they debate among these three legislative arms of the European Union. Liz, sometimes those trilogues can go on into the very early hours of the morning. We've seen, for example, some of the parliamentarians involved saying they're bringing big packs full of snacks for their teams because they're expecting a long day of negotiations. But really now, Liz, it's the final details, and we do expect this law to clear. And once it is cleared, it will then go to a couple of more administrative phases, but we can expect it to come into force within the next year or so. So it's something that, at least for the President of the European Union, is moving relatively quickly in terms of legislation. That's something that can often take a very long time, but here they're trying to speed up and accelerate the process to make sure these laws come into force to regulate those online platforms.
And Rosie, once enacted, how significant would this law really be in controlling big tech?
Well, the EU certainly says it will be very significant indeed. This is essentially making big tech have greater obligations toward users and towards their reporting obligations toward governments. Now, the key here, really, according to the European Union, is to make what is illegal offline illegal online. So the tech platforms, depending on their size, but those that are deemed large, so that's where they have more than 45 million users within the European Union, will have significant obligations. They'll have to undertake their own risk assessments on at least an annual basis, we understand, based on the proposals for this law which are being debated. Within that risk assessment, they'll need to look into what the risks are on their own platforms for disinformation, for illegal content, and for online harms. Now, that might be, for example, towards children and content that might push children towards harmful behaviours like eating disorders or self-harm. They will then have to show what measures they plan to take to mitigate these risks. And that will be public, so it will be open to scrutiny, for example, by interested groups. So parental NGOs, for example, could say, well, we don't think this is enough. Those platforms are doing enough to protect children. Now, if the European Commission, that's the bloc's executive, said that the mitigation measures the platforms propose to take based on their own risk assessments don't go far enough, the Commission can intervene and make them give them obligations to act further and slap them with very heavy fines. So, as you mentioned, up to 6% of annual turnover. So, at least from Brussels' perspective, a very significant step toward regulating big tech and making what's illegal offline illegal on the online space as well.
Oh, thanks for that, Rosie Birch in Brussels.